now the next thing we're going to talk about is fuel trim. What is fuel trim? Fuel trim is the process that adjusts the fuel delivery through the injectors. And we can see the adjustment while watching short-term and long-term fuel trim. Fuel trim value, now look at this slide here. Fuel trim values are very important, so they are included in the freeze frame data. The data is shown as percentage, either positive or negative, with 0% indicating neutral. Now, if we're sitting at 0, that means no correction is needed. We want a range plus or minus 10%. Anything above or below 10% indicates out of fuel control. As long as within that range, 0 plus or minus 10, it's in closed loop within fuel control. But it should never actually sit on 0 though. It should never stay on 0. It should fluctuate like this, above and below the 0 line. Anything, you see the right side of this chart, it says anything above 10%, I'm adding fuel. Anything below 10%, negative 10 I should say, it's subtracting fuel. When I say that, it's the PCM doing this adjustment. So I'm at 15%. On a short-term fuel trim, it's adding fuel for some reason. When I'm at negative 15%, the PCM subtracting fuel for some reason. It's your job, or the technician's job, to figure out why. Greater than 10% means the system is adding fuel, while less than 0% means the system is subtracting fuel. You can see here, I have, what's this, a short-term fuel trim showing lean, long-term showing lean. Right, the short-term values are volatile, meaning that they are erased every time the ignition switch is turned off. That means the short-term fuel trim is following O2 sensors, it's adjusting itself based off the O2 sensor. The computer is watching the O2 sensor and making adjustment off that sensor. But as soon as you turn the key off, that information is lost. Long-term fuel trim values are a long-term adaptive strategy. Long-term is learning the process where it needs to be at to get this car running its best. Strategy, which means that it changes based off short-term fuel trim and will adjust to changes based off all operating conditions over a period of time. Now, long-term fuel trim follows the short-term fuel trim. Its job is to keep the short-term fuel trim within a design value. So that's a learning process. The long-term fuel trim information is not lost when you turn the key off, because it's learned to be in a certain position to keep that short-term near 0. If we can keep the short-term fuel trim near 0, O2 sensor will switch and we'll be in closed loop and better fuel control. Oh, I forgot to say one thing also. Remember, also the short-term fuel trim reacts right off the O2 sensor, and the long-term reacts from the short-term fuel trim. As the PCM determines the short-term and long-term fuel trim are their maximum values, and the airflow ratios imbalance exists, such as a vacuum leak or a leaked injector, it will store a fuel trim related DTC. After establishing loop status of the vehicle, evaluate the Scan2 data along with a fog gas analyzer to determine if the PCM is providing a rich or lean correction and the extent of that such correction. Short-term fuel trim controls the shifting the O2 sensor. Like I said earlier, the short-term is following the O2 sensor. It keeps the O2 sensor switching. Long-term fuel trim adjusts to allow the short-term fuel trim to operate properly. So the long-term fuel trim is following the short-term fuel trim. And again, the long-term fuel trim is plus or minus 10 also. The only thing with the long-term fuel trim, it has a bigger correction value than the short-term fuel trim. And some systems have a real fuel trim strategy. That won't be discussed on this test, but that's probably something you can know. They want you to know. Here's an example. Example of some problems. Fuel trim positive, say plus 15. Low speed and low, it could be a vacuum leak. Positive, high speed and low fuel volume or positive, low fuel volume or pressure. If not, then the mass airflow sensor. So basically what it's saying is, I got a positive adding fuel. And what can cause that? Vacuum leaks, low fuel pressure, unmetered air, mass airflow sensors. These all the conditions cause the short-term or long fuel trim to go out of value. It's saying that the negative fuel trim, example, the first one, low speed and low, could be a leaking injector, because that leaking injector leaks fuel. That's rich. The computer can try to compensate for that by trying to take some fuel away by closing the injectors. And negative fuel trim at high speed, it could be a map sensor, restricted exhaust, or some other engine fault. Negative at any speeds, input problem, like O2 sensor, map, IAT, a sensor input problem. But again, remember, the basis of the fuel trim, it helps control fuel delivery through the injectors. The short-term fuel trim job to follow O2 sensor to keep it switching. The proper operating range of the O2 sensor is 100 to 900 millivolts. Short-term fuel trim should be plus or minus 10%. Long-term should be plus or minus 10%. And the job of the long-term fuel trim is to follow the short-term fuel trim. They keep that near zero. If you keep the short-term fuel trim near zero, O2 sensor will start switching, and we'll be in fuel control. Okay, let me know if that helps. If not, hit me up. I'm out.